And I'd like to introduce Jesse Smith, who's running for the House State Representative for House District 18. Jesse.
Hi, my name is Jesse Smith. I'm running for the Oregon State House of Representatives for House District 18. I am a parent, an author, a web developer, and a concerned citizen. My background is I grew up on a family farm, bucking hay bales and raising pigs. As a young adult, I worked as a music teacher and as a union member and in various minimum wage positions. Then I learned a couple of scripting languages, got a master's degree in business administration, started my own business, and joined the Chamber of Commerce. So, based on the variety of my life experiences, I feel like I can empathize with Oregonians from a variety of different backgrounds and work towards solutions where everybody wins. But let's face it, I'm a long shot candidate, and I know this. If I'm being really optimistic, there is a chance that I could win if we have a high voter turnout among registered Democrats, and if we can build a coalition with non affiliated voters who want to support the right to choose a safe and legal abortion. And if enough of those voters fill out their ballots all the way down to the state representative race. But that is a lot of ifs given this district's voter registration numbers and previous voting history. So, why then would I even bother running? I've been asking myself that, and I realized something. I ran because I wanted to change the conversation. I decided to learn more about the concerns of the people in my community, and now I'm hoping to leverage my platform to share their ideas with a broader audience. Public education is a concern for all Oregonians, not just to parents, but also to all of us who will ever be a customer or a medical patient or a retiree. Educational outcomes matter to us all. We need to support our public school teachers and staff, first by bringing their compensation up to a level that matches their education and experience. We need to hire more student support staff, especially counseling and special education. We must revisit and revise the outdated quality education model, and we must reduce our reliance on standardized test scores for performance evaluations, and instead re-emphasize concepts and experiences which cannot be standardized, but which support a lifelong love of learning. As citizens of the great state of Oregon, we all care about our economy. And to us, as Democrats, caring about the economy means fair pay for all workers, including a livable minimum wage and overtime protections. It means equal pay for women and minorities. It means the right to unionize. It means supporting farmers and city dwellers alike. And it also means addressing the cost of living in other ways, such as by increasing the availability of affordable housing. Currently, as you are all well aware, the most glaring sign of Oregon's economic mess is our problem with homelessness. And there is no single simple fix to a complex problem, but I would support a variety of proposals from new affordable housing and repurposing old buildings to increased rental assistance, increasing the availability of mental health services, and even hiring homeless people to work on local beautification projects. As residents of the beautiful Pacific Northwest, and especially those of us who live in rural areas like Oregon's House District 18, I think most of us care about the natural environment in our own way. As an outdoors enthusiast myself, I grew up camping and hiking, and I want to preserve our beautiful natural environment for future generations. That means we must invest in clean energy technologies, cut down on pollution, and enforce urban growth boundaries. As global climate change increases the frequency and severity of extreme weather events, we must plan ahead to mitigate the effects of droughts and heat waves. To protect our most vulnerable citizens during heat waves, we should consider subsidizing the purchase and installation of air conditioning units for low income households. To engineer win-win solutions for the water resource usage of our farming communities in times of increasing drought, we should consider the example of the Aquifer Recharge Project they've been building up in Representative Ken Helms' district out by Beaverton. Oregon could benefit from a large-scale system of similar projects in rural areas to store stormwater runoff water in our depleted natural aquifers. It would be a lot quicker and cheaper than building a massive desalination plant. We all care about healthcare as well, because we and our loved ones all need healthcare services, sometimes at a desperate time in our lives. On a personal level, for myself personally, a number of my family members have devoted their careers to serving the health and well-being of the public. And I want to see everyone gain access to high quality, evidence-based healthcare, including preventative care. Now, the Affordable Care Act made things better, but there are still serious financial barriers to healthcare access. And this is what constituents told me. This is what I heard from people when I was out knocking on doors. Some of our neighbors right here in our own communities are terrified of losing their Medicaid benefits because if they lost their Medicaid, then they or their spouse would not be able to afford their medical treatments. Can you imagine this? They have to decline work opportunities and stay poor because if they did get a job, the work would not pay enough to cover the cost of their health care. The clear solution is to make healthcare free of cost or nearly free for almost everybody. And until the federal government figures out a way to do this, the way to bring universal health care to Oregon is to fund a major expansion of the Oregon Health Plan. Those are my key major platform points. Do I have another 3 or 4 minutes to talk about abortion and guns and the right to vote?
You can take 3 minutes.
Okay. I believe that abortion is the issue of the year in 2022. Those of us who are news hounds and political insiders are aware that this year's Supreme Court decision in Dobbs v. Jackson was the product of a Republican long game that has spanned decades. But I think a lot of centrist voters are going to be really angry about it. Now that Republicans have announced their intent to implement a nationwide ban on a federal level, I have to wonder if perhaps they may have miscalculated their overreach. If congressional Democrats keep or expand their majorities this year, it will be on the basis of this issue. And if I even come close to beating Rick Lewis this year, it will be on the basis of this issue. My opponent, the incumbent Republican Rick Lewis, isn't real noisy about his politics. He doesn't even have a Twitter account, or at least not that I could find anyway. But in the Oregon State Legislature, Rick Lewis has repeatedly introduced or supported laws that would restrict the freedom of choice here in Oregon, including by regulating access to medicinal abortion and by introducing third-party lawsuits as a mechanism for the bullying and harassment of healthcare providers. On the question of abortion, Rick Lewis and I are complete opposites. I believe it's not the government's place to dictate people's personal decisions. And in order to make those private decisions even possible, I support the expansion of abortion access here in Oregon to compensate for the effects on Oregonians of reduced access in neighboring states like Idaho. A lot of people are also concerned about guns this year. For myself, I grew out in the country. Going hunting and owning guns are just part of the lifestyle out here. And I'm not interested in trying to change that. But the problem is disturbed people keep using military weapons to mass murder civilians in public settings. We cannot allow this to continue. So we need common sense gun safety laws in the name of public safety. And that includes background checks for purchasers. And that includes common sense restrictions on the sale of military hardware and weapons. And finally, this year, a lot of people are rightfully concerned with questions about protecting our elections and reforming our campaign finance laws. I share a concern with most Oregonians that we should continuously strive to create a more fair and open democracy. We must safeguard the right to vote. We must protect our poll workers from harassment, and we must maintain the integrity of our elections in the face of coordinated disinformation campaigns and anti-democratic movements such as we've been seeing in these past several years. And in order to earn the people's faith and trust in our democracy, we must improve the accessibility of our political system. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I mean that a single working mother earning minimum wage should be able to afford to run for a political office and win. I call this the single working mother principle. It is the basic idea that money should not determine the outcome of our elections. Making that idea into a reality is a long-term goal, but I look forward to working with my fellow legislators to make our system the best it can be. Thank you.
Cool. One thing I thought that I meant to do at the beginning and I spaced on it, I'm going to put up your map because with all the House district lines being different, I just want to make sure our audience understands exactly what geography you're covering. Here we go. Are y'all seeing that now?
Yeah.
So you
So House,
going all the way from Donald up in the north and St. Paul to the west, all the way across out to, boy, all the way over almost into, is that Deschutes County in the purple there? Or Wasco, yeah. So are
it
there any
ends up in the
additional comments you'd
mountains.
want us to know about just you're running, and obviously there's a lot of rural areas out there. Are there any other kind of highlights you'd want to have just with the map up here? You've got some populated areas, you've got Silverton and
Silverton, Mount Angel, Molalla is going to be a really interesting case study in this election because it has traditionally been the reddest city in this district. But more people are moving to town, and of those people, you know, they tend to be young and Hispanic and the sort of people who often vote Democratic. So over time, as we see these demographic shifts in places like Molalla, we could also see the voter alignment begin to change. Now, I'm not saying that that has actually happened yet. What we really see in the entire district is most voters are independent, they're non-affiliated. And I think that's largely thanks to Motor Voter, which I think is a fantastic program. I love the idea of having everybody enrolled. We also know that a lot of people are not motivated. They enrolled automatically when they got their driver's license, but they don't really care about politics. They, people have told me when I was knocking on their doors that they're irritated by the robocalls and by the television advertisements and all, what they perceive as all the negativity in politics. So I think we have a long ways to go to flipping this district in terms of voter registration. But if we can appeal to the values and common sense of the non-affiliated voters, I believe that's the way to forge that alliance that would be necessary to make a change in this district.
to make some headway, for sure. All right, let's open it up for some questions for Jesse. Marianne.
Hi, Jesse. One of the things that I'm also observing, and I think it's something that has to be done on the state level as well, as we're looking at all the prognostications of what's going to be happening because of the climate change. We're going to be an ocean level rising. Then we're probably going to be seeing a lot of people from other parts of the country wanting to move here because it's for one thing, we're not boiling hot. And the other is that we do get rain. So especially folks who are farmers in other parts of the country are probably going to be looking to be buying farms in Molalla and Hubbard and those kind of places. So what should be done on a state level as far as preparing as well as controlling what happens when folks who will be climate refugees show up here?
That's a great question. Thanks very much. Um, I I think protecting farmland is at the heart of with the intersection between the interests of the farmers and the interests of the environmentalist. We all want to see these open spaces maintained. So I think really one of the most important parts of what you're saying, what do we do as more people move to the area? We really need to make sure that we continue to enforce our urban growth boundaries, because as more people move to the areas, developers always want to sort of push out beyond those boundaries, maybe like skip a zone and then start developing like a bedroom community. And every time we turn a field into a parking lot or a housing development, it has benefits for the people who live there and the people who make a living by building the houses, but then we lose that farmland. It never goes back from being residential to being farmland. I mean, not in the sort of generational time frame that we think of. So
I guess what I'm mostly, there was an article I read recently and actually sent to some friends of mine up in Woodburn area that grow blueberries. And what's starting to happen is that the berry growers down in California, the strawberry growers and the blueberry growers are starting to move north because it's too hot down there and there's not enough water. They're even going to places like Ontario, Canada. So it isn't even just the sprawl of residential building. It's the fact that our own farmers are going to be displaced by other like corporate farms coming up from elsewhere. So it's like, that's something I think we need to be prepared for as well.
yeah, for me, I would be careful to draw a distinction between corporate farms and family farms. Even when there's family farmers moving to the area, it's different to me personally from the concept of these corporate farms that not only are huge and tend to be perhaps slightly less attached to the land that they're farming, but they're run by these organizations that aren't even on site or necessarily even in the state of Oregon, that they might own production land in a number of states. And it's I would regulate those differently than I would regulate the family farms. But I think I don't have a specific policy prepared for you on this question, but it's a good question, and I'd be interested in discussing it some more with a lot of folks, farmers and workers and other policymakers who can share their insights.
Yeah, I was just going to introduce somebody that usually asks a question right about now. Aileen Aileen K is one of our active participants on our candidate support calls. And she and her husband own some land out there, and it's agricultural and it's beautiful. She lives out in Turner, the Turner area.
Nice.
So, Aileen, did you have any additional questions about land use as it relates to, Jesse's kind of turf is all in that ballpark where it's like, it looks like nothing but opportunity for developers, it's just nothing but green, I think. Are there any other insights you'd want to share or questions you'd want to have for Jesse?
Well, I'm 90% sure that there is going to be legislation proposed to streamline somehow the urban growth boundary procedure, which scares me to death.
Yeah.
Also, that there might be a bill to supersite these huge buildings that where you make the chips, and I think that they use a lot of water and they want to be out on farmland, and that there are legislators who want to what they call supersite, just set aside some land for them and let them do it. And it scares me because I think a lot of the Democrats who are in there now and who might be in there, not Tom or Richard, but anyway, are in favor of that. And they just say, oh, there are all these poor people who, like out on the streets. That is not who the housing developers are going to build houses for. It's just,
Right.
to me, a scam.
Yeah.
We definitely need more housing for people and more affordable housing. But our system of urban growth boundaries has land set aside, like Tom Anderson had mentioned tonight. So I am concerned. I know that there are going to be those two bills, and I'm scared that a lot of the Democrats are going to go for it because it's a simplistic answer.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I'm sorry to say I was not previously aware of the bills, but I think this is an excellent example of an area where if we really care about protecting the environment and our farmland, then we need to draw a hard and fast line and say that you can't set aside this land for this industrial purpose because it's already been set aside for this agricultural purpose. We've got people living here and farming this land, and we've got wildlife that comes through and crosses over it back and forth, and this is part of the land that we want to preserve. And every time we put a silicon microchip assembly plant where there used to be a farm, it's never going to go back to being a farm. We need the microchips, but do we have to make them in what had been farmland up to this point? I'm thinking the farmland has value as farmland, and we need to recognize that and protect it. I think that's our job as human beings, to accept our responsibility for good stewardship of the earth. And sometimes that's difficult because we have to make trade-offs, but I think they'll be able to find a site for this without tearing up some fields. That's what I think.
And the reason I didn't ask him a question about land use is he said urban growth boundary in his talk, and I go, okay, he's okay. So
Yeah.
I don't need to ask him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and Aileen is a bit of a, she's had lots of conversation with lawmakers over the years on this topic. So as you go further in your candidacy, if you want to really get to an expert in this area, she is definitely well connected in what's going on. So I would, recommend you to her.
Thank you.
So with that, we're going to ask for your closing statement. And if you can limit this to about like 5 minutes of why the people in HD18 should give you their vote. Let's hear it.
Thank you. So my closing statement is very similar to the last few paragraphs of my campaign policy points that I was talking about earlier. I'm very honored to have been endorsed by the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, by the Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon, by the Union of Food and Commercial Workers, Local 555, by the Oregon Education Association, because of these things that I've been saying this evening, that we need to stand up for education, for workers' rights, for the teachers, and for the students in our public schools. And we need to stand up for the natural environment and take responsibility as self-aware human beings for the consequences that our decisions have on the world around us. And that principle, I'd say that in terms of the environment, but it also applies to our society and our economic policies as well. So we need to be aware of how these things have ripple effects, and make sure that as our decisions ripple outward, the decisions that we're making are good decisions, and that those ripples are positive, that they support people, that we rise by lifting one another up. And in closing, I would like to say I see a terrible crisis in democracy right now with people losing faith. And I believe that when we work together to build a stronger democracy, we build the society of the future. And I would like to encourage everyone to get involved, to participate, to vote, make sure you vote, and consider running for office or volunteering or, just writing to your legislator. Get involved and support democracy, and tell all your friends. And we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jesse. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight. Thank you so, so much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and hope you have a great day. Thanks
Bye-bye.
very much.